So hello everybody. Welcome to our today's webinar about 3D object creation for Pandoras Box. Today I will show you how to do this with 3ds Max. As a small introduction to this topic, actually this has been requested quite a lot from our customers, and also on the forum somebody wrote that he would like to see this. And it has led to a small discussion in our team because some of us had the opinion we are absolutely no experts in this. A lot of our customers use 3ds Max and other programs in a more often than we do, and they have a much a bigger knowledge. But anyhow, we thought we would do this in a short format, so maybe 45 minutes or so, just to show you the most basic things. And I will show you how I got to learn this program and what were the stepping stones actually that I tripled over. And just so that you don't have to do this as well. And yeah, it's more or less just meant to get you started. There are a lot of other tutorials out there that you can watch and progress afterwards. So this is really just the basics. What I will show you today is I thought I would do it in two parts. The first one is maybe like 80% of the webinar, just creating objects in 3ds Max and importing them in Pandoras Box. And in the last part, I will show you a small example how you can use 3ds Max to visualize a 2D drawing, for example. So if you get a cut drawing, what can you do with this in 3ds Max to have a better understanding of the environment? So I will just show you one example that I used this for. Whilst I talk you through those two topics, we will have a look at all these things. So we will talk about different object types, file types, about the coordinate system, unit setup, or where you can do scaling. We will have a look at pivot points, the UV map, and polygon count. And in the last part, very, very roughly, I will really just scratch the surface. We'll just show you how that you can set up cameras and rendering in 3ds Max, of course. I guess you can spend a lot of time talking about each point. I will try to squeeze everything into this webinar. So I hope I will not talk too fast. Just keep in mind this is going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. So you can rewatch this webinar and pause at any time on YouTube. We will upload it as soon as possible in the next days. So, yeah, let's go. I will start with 3ds Max. I am currently using the license from 2016, but more or less you should be able to adopt this to any other version as well. Of course, the one or the other feature is a little bit different, but as this is a very basic tutorial or webinar, yeah, things are not going to change in that so much. I just checked out the prices yesterday for 3ds Max. I saw that they also have the possibility to buy the license for a month, or to rent it, or to use it for a month, and that is at least for Germany it was like 260 euros. So I think it's for a long time it was like, okay, this license is so expensive, nobody is going to use it if you're going to get started. But I believe for a job or when you have a license for somebody else, this is very interesting actually, to just do this monthly purchase and then have a look and see whether you get along with the program, and then think about buying it for a longer time of period. So this is the surface, the interface from 3ds. I will not explain a lot of stuff about like the general things in here. There are a lot of other tutorials. I will just show you how to do the stuff that we need for Pandoras Box. So first of all, let's just create a plane and import this one to Pandora to see whether we get the units correctly. To create something, this is the so-called create panel, I think they call it. I have here the geometry selected, and under for the default standards, I can click here on plane. And it's always like this, that you click in here, draw something, and we have a plane. The size can be viewed here. So currently we have something with 44 and 52 units. And this is actually the very first thing I want to, the very first stepping stone, unit setup. So for 3ds Max, where you can find the units is under Customize, Unit Setup. And here are actually two things. This is the display unit scale, and I've set it up to generic units. And the system unit scale can be found here, and I have set it up to meters. You can select other things in here, but for our purpose it makes the most sense to have it in meters. If you set it up to something else, or if the person who does the 3D objects for you has set it up to something else, you can still scale it later in Pandora. We will have a look at how this is working. But if you want to get started with the program, this is the setting I would recommend. So, so far to the units in here, I would like to have a plane that covers my entire screen in Pandoras Box. In Pandora, even though we have changed it to pixels, lately the display units, we are still working with 16 generic units for a screen width. And as I have a 16:9 screen, my horizontal generic units is 16, and the length in here should be then 9. So now you already see that it's a little smaller. A nice trick to get a nice view in here is to, I've selected the object currently, and if I click the bottom down here, zoom extends all, I see those viewports and my object in here. Now this plane is laying on the ground. If I would import it to Pandora, it would also lay on the ground, and this is not what I want, for a plane at least. My camera is looking into the space, so actually I want it to be spanned on the z-axis plane. So I could rotate it, or I just simply do it again. I just hit the delete button, click on plane again, and now I go to the front viewport and select it here. And again I do 16:9, and now I have my plane standing in here. The last thing is I want to move the plane to the 0, 0 point. So I click on the select button here, and I say that it should go to 0, 0, 0. An alternative to place an object, I would just Control Z. Another possibility is to click here and use those. Use the fields down here, but I will show you later. I don't know why it's displaying 0 right now. So I've placed it. I press again this button here. It's one of my favorites. And now I want to export this for Pandora. I will export it now twice in order to show you something. Firstly, I just press the export button. And I will name it like this. So a plain 16:9 FBX. And in this export button, export dialog, for the FBX format, I can set a lot of options in here. Unfortunately, I was not able to reset this to the initial look, so I believe what I clicked was triangulate, and the other stuff I pretty much, I just let the default. Triangulate is a very important setting, and Pari, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to introduce you to Pari. Pari is the name of my co-moderator, and she
Hello.
will, I'm sorry, Pari, I'm so excited. Yeah, she will, on Friday she is talking you through the stuff in Blender, so we thought we would do it in 2 parts, and I will talk you through the general modeling terms and show you 3ds Max, and Pari will do that in Blender. And she will tell you a little more about the triangulate option. The other stuff in here, like animation cameras and so on, we didn't set up anything of this, so I just let it like it is. And this is an important thing to just have a look at. I leave the units at automatic, and the scale factor is 1. So it's not rescaled for the export. The up axis, I choose that it should be the y-axis, because in Pandora we have the y-axis as the up one, and here you see that it's in fact Z for 3ds Max. In general, if you look at 3D modeling softwares, Z is very common to be the up one. And it's just a different way of naming the axes. And in fact, there are 2 different coordinate systems. And in Pandora, if I will just show you in the manual. Later on, I will give you the link so you can have a look at it as well. If you just have your left hand like this, in Pandora it's always X, Y, Z. So if you look at yourself at Pandora and make your thumb the X-axis and your index the Y and the 3rd finger and the Z-axis, you see that it spans up like this. So it's always the left-handed system. If we do the same for 3ds Max, we cannot twist our left hand to match the axes, but we can do the same thing with the right hand. So X goes in this direction, Y goes in this direction, and then Z goes up. So we know that this system is actually a right-handed system. It's just a nice thing to know, left and right-handed, and it's also defining the sense of orientation. So in Pandora, if you have this as the x-axis, for example, the way how your fingers turn is the positive rotation. And in here, it would be exactly the opposite. So I set it up that the up axis in Pandora is Y, and now I can already export it. This is just a warning that this is going to be an editable mesh, but it doesn't matter for us right now. So I just click OK. And now I want to export it a second time in another format. And this time I choose the 3ds format. What I can also choose is the OBJ format. This is also able to be imported in Pandora. And the 4th supported format for Pandora is X-file, but I cannot select it currently here. For years, X-file, the X-file type was the only one that you can import to Pandora, and in order to export it from here, you had to kind of download a plugin and install it, but this is not necessary anymore because we do support FBX, 3ds, and OBJ, so it's no need to use the X-file anymore. But you can if you want to in Pandora. So anyhow, I wanted to use the 3ds one. I will just choose the same name, _2. Save. Okay. So now let's have a look how this looks in Pandoras Box. This is a more or less empty project in Pandoras Box. I haven't set up anything unless I put a client here so we can have some layers, and I have some images up here. So if I want to see how the objects look like in Pandora, I go to Objects, Webinar, and now I can import my plane, the FBX one. In here, I do not want to set up anything. I just want to show you how it looks like from the very beginning. So I click OK. And if I put it onto my layer, you see already that it fills out my camera viewport in here. Because my camera is reading that my current monitor is also 16:9, so it fits perfectly. So we know that the unit setup and everything else, that the basic configuration is set up correctly. However, if I do the same with the 3ds file, again, I just take the defaults, I see that it's much too big. And now comes a very magic number. If we scale this now down, somehow that it fits a little bigger, we see that it's somewhere nearby 0.4. And this is always a number that you should recognize. I will just show you the calculator and then you will see why. 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. And if I revert this, I will get this number. So roughly 0.4 is a number that you should always recognize as the kind of inch number. So this, if you need to do the scaling, what you can do when you import it is you can say, I want to overwrite the system unit, and it should be inch, in fact. Was it like this? Yes, overwrite to inch. And if we now put it here and reset our scaling, you see that it's fitting. So you have two options for the 3ds format. Either you scale it up or import, or you scale it in here with the layers. What I will now do for the second part of the for the upcoming webinar stuff is I want to set up a folder, and I want it. Let me just clean up this stuff. We don't need it anymore. And I want to set it up as a watched folder. Content, objects. So everything that I'm saving now in this folder is going to be automatically loaded in my Pandoras Box object, my folder here. If I now have a lot of 3ds files, what you can do is you can go to the configuration, to the resources up there, and if you scale all the way down, you see now that you can set up here the default setting when objects are imported. Okay.
Martina, there is a question for you.
Oh, awesome. Okay. That's a good point right now to make a small.
Okay. Int conversion is needed always for 3D S objects. Can we do scaling during export?
I tried to find out how to do this correctly in 3ds Max, but I couldn't. So even when what I tested yesterday is when I said here the unit setup to inch right away, or if I, yeah, it didn't make any difference, what was a little weird, I thought. And when I export it, I don't have any export dialog for 3ds. So for FBX, I do have a lot of settings that I can choose, but for 3ds, it's just doing one thing and I cannot really influence it. So as I haven't found anything in here in 3ds, I yeah, summarized it so that you have to scale it in on the Pandoras Box side. It could be if you have other versions of 3ds that there the export is working differently, or if you use the 3ds format from another program. I'm not really sure, does Blender offer the 3ds option? Kari?
In Blender? You mean by scaling?
And when you export something from Blender, can you choose 3ds as a file object?
I don't think so.
Okay. I know that other programs also support 3ds, so maybe there you have other options. Yeah, to do the scaling already there. Let me just make it a little darker. Anything else? Any other questions so far?
No, not now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I will not set it right now because I am from now on I will use the FBX file type. So I just wanted to show you that if you have a watch folder set up in here, this is the point where you can still find the setting. Let's have one look at the pivot point. So back in 3ds, what I will now do is I want to move it to 8. And now what you see is that, yeah, I moved the plane over to the left side, and I want now that the pivot point sits on my 0, 0 point. So to do this in 3ds, I go to this hierarchy panel, and I say that I want to affect the pivot only. And now I can set this one back to 0. And if I export this one right now, wait a sec, I will just show you what this actually means. So if I now move, oops, still having, so if I now rotate the object, it's rotating around the pivot point. So obviously this is working in all directions. So this is just the point where I hold on to the layer and where it's rotating around. However, if I would export this now to Pandora, it would give us the correct position. Wait a second. I told you something wrong. If I will just reset this one. I'm resetting the pivot point. And if I now export this, I will again choose the FBX format. So if I take the oops. So what you see now is that I have the moved position, but if I rotate it now, it's rotating around the 0, 0 point, even though my pivot point in here is actually in the center. This is very important to remember. We are not taking the pivot point from the object when you're importing it into Pandora, because we have our own pivot point in here. The advantage is when you have an entire scene, for example, a floor and a table and some walls, etc. You can select all of your layers if you have separated them on different layers and move them all with one angle, and they are kind of in a group, and you can scale, you can rotate the entire group and not each object by itself. If you want to move this, rotate it around itself, what you can do in Pandora is you can just show you the gizmo. Here you see the pivot point, and if I go to the rotation, here you see that you can now move the pivot point somewhere else, and if you now rotate it, it rotates around the center. So when you import it, it's always at 0, 0, and then you can move it to another point if you want to do this. Now let's talk about units in Pandora for a second. Here you see that I have pixels in here, but still our 16:9 plane covers our entire screen, and this is pretty much what the same as in 3ds. What we show is the unit pixels, but the entire system is always generic units. For a long time, we didn't have the option for pixels. It was always just set up that the screen width is 16 generic units. And later on, I think it was version 6, where is it? Unit management. We introduced this unit management option in here. And we say now as a default, this is the old default, that we also always have 16 3D units to 1 resolution. And now we use a fixed relationship. So we simply recalculate how many 3D units fit in 1000 pixels. And this is, per default, this is just done with it initializes with a 1922 1080 resolution. So if you would calculate it, it's 8 generic units per 1000 pixels. As the underlying 16 generic units per width is still the same, the size has not changed when I imported the file. But if I want to, so you can, you don't have to set the other one if just because you're working with 3D units. It's more or less a choice. If you just want to import a file and scale it a little bit and not very much move it around, or if the movement is not so crucial, I would recommend you just leave the default with pixels, so you don't do anything in this panel here. And then if you have other layers with other images, etc., it's just nice to have the pixel displayed in here. However, if you import an object in order to be able to track it, so if you get tracking data from Widget Designer, I would recommend that you use this setting. So I will just apply it once. And now what you see actually is that I have moved the pivot point to 8 generic units, which in our 16 generic units wide plane is, of course, the middle. I would not recommend to jump around during one project. It's just nicer to set it up once in the beginning. If you later on see that you have to change it, it's okay, but I would not go back and forth all the time. It would be a little confusing, I think. So for this demonstration now, I will just leave it at the old default from Pandora. So if I now set up here 8 exactly, we will see that it's really exactly in the middle of the plane in here. So far to the units in Pandora. We covered so far the units, the coordinate system, the pivot points. Before I start talking about the UV map, is there anything I haven't covered so far that you wanted to know? Are there any questions?
There are no questions. Thank you, Martina.
Okay. Before actually I talk about the UV map for a second, in old versions we were not able to display an object if there is no texture assigned to it. We have now changed this, so if you wonder where you could set it up, it's in here. So what you can do is you can say I want to override the global configuration and I want to choose a different color, maybe something like this. Yeah, and the default shading can be found in the preview display under default shading. So here you can also set up the colors or the wireframes and how the reflection should be. But normally the default ones are just okay. Another thing I want to activate in here is the ground grid. So I want to see it in the global preview. And the other stuff is okay. So if I now go back, it looks more like the old Pandora and more like 3ds. So we have a ground grid and see this layer in here. I would like to show you one thing. Just reset the stuff here. As you see, the grid is separated into, well, small squares, and per default it's like this, that one square is exactly one generic unit. So we can calculate here 8 plus 8 is 16. It's just nice to know this. So now let's have a look at UV maps in 3ds. When you create something in here, it has already something, it has already a UV map, an automatic one. So if you put a picture on here in Pandora, it looks like this, pretty much as we would expect from a plane. If you do the same, for example, with a cube, I delete the plane, I spin up my cube in here, and I export it and I wait for it in here. So now you see that the cube was done like this. So again, it kind of makes sense. From any side, you just have the texture mapped on it. If you want to do another UV map in there, actually Pari is going to show you in Blender a more extended way how to do this. I will just show you in here where you can, what tools you have in here. So I will go to the Modify. Oh, firstly, we need to have a material on here. So I opened the material editor, which gives us this dialog. I click on the first material, and then in order to just choose a picture, the best way is to click on bitmap. So next to the diffuse option in this checkbox here, bitmap, okay. It routes me into this path. I choose the color bars, okay. I assign it to the selection, and then I need to click this button, Show Shaded Materials, which already gives us a blurred image. And what I then found out to make this a little nicer is if you click on Realistic in the viewport, say Materials, and then the last option, Realistic Materials, you now see that it's a better resolution. To even have an even better resolution in here, what you can do is you can click on configure, and then it was under display performance. Here is the texture maps. Actually, I already put it to 1024. I think the default is lower. So just to show you what it does. Yeah, now you see that it's getting more blurry. So I will just give it a higher number so that we have here a clearer view of what is happening. If we wanted to have a cube only covered with, from one side, from here what we can do is we use the modifier list, use your VMap, and then what it's now suggesting is it gives us the UV map from the top part, but in fact I want it to be from the y-axis. So it spans, it kind of projects the image from there. And now I want it to fit. So now I have this. So if I would now import it, export it and import it in Pandora, it would only show us this as a textured site. Yeah, the planar and the box are pretty much those mappings that I normally use for my objects. Yeah, it's nice to play around with these. For an even more detailed way to apply a UV map, what you can also do is I will just delete this one. And, oh no, it's called Unwrap. You have the Unwrap Modifier, and in here, if you open the editor, and if you now open here the map, this is an option if you have already a material assigned to it. So now you see here our image. Let's show it a little bigger. This is not a good example. Wait a second, I will just close this, delete this, make a second object, a pyramid. I think this is then a little more obvious what's happening, so I can again assign it to here. It's already pressed that it's visible in the viewport. And now if I go to the modifier, unwrap, dialog. So now what you see is that this face actually is cutting out, let me just take the color bars again. So for example, you see just slightly, I see some light blue color in here in this triangle. This one cuts it out a little bit different because the size is differently set up, and the bottom, because it's just a square, it automatically did this. Yeah, so this is a very, very detailed way of you can manipulate it in here. There's an entire topic in the manual from 3ds. So if you want to dive in more with unwrapping and modifying the UV map, this is the place where you would do this. So far to the UV mapping, I wanted to actually show you a different example with planes, but I think I'm running out a little bit of time. I will just do it quickly. So I'll delete this, go back to my front view, make a plane. I say that the width is 8 and the height is half of my screen, 4.5. I want to have this, I move it to 0, 0. I will do a second plane here. And this should be the same height and 4 wide. And of course should then be moved to 6, because this is 8, yep. And if I want to get it to the other side, what I can, for example, do is I can make a small array just so that you see this dialog once. This is a very, very handy one as well. I want to make a copy from this object. I like to see what I'm doing, and the x distance from it should be 2 plus 8 plus 2, so that's 12. And I want to have 1. Oh, it's minus 12. Yeah, 2, of course. So 1, 2 with the distance of 12 generic units on the negative x-axis. So, okay. Now I want to have a UV map spanned across all of them. So I select all of them, I go to the modifier, UV map, material, and I want to fit it from the y-axis, fit, here we go. So if I export this as 3 planes, oh, actually, let me give it another name. Export combined UV map. I'm just waiting for it in Pandora. Just resetting this layer, and I wanted to show you how I can see them as 3 objects. Let me just refresh this. So if I import this here, I want to change this, the import setting, to see actually all hierarchy levels. So now I have here 3 submeshes. If I just double click on here, I assign the layer to the object as 1 to the layer. So with some test pattern on it, it looks exactly like in 3ds. If I make a right click and say assign 3 submeshes to the devices consecutively, I have now here the option to fade in and out each separate plane from this. If you now want to have modify the UV map so that you see an image on this plane only, you can either revert the changes in 3ds, so just delete this UV map, or you can change it in here by, I'll just show it to you like this. I'm just resetting this on here. I'm assigning the entire thing. I need to create an editable mesh from this. Okay. It converts it now to an editable mesh, and if I assign it to this, to the layer, I can now go to planar UV mapping mode. Resetting my camera. I click in here, make Control A, and I say I want to have a 1-to-1 map. I calculate the UV maps, and if I now go back, I have here 3 different layers. So now if I assign the object again like this, it looks like that. So different ways to play around with the UV map, either in Pandora or on the 3ds side. you have, yeah, it's up to you. You have the flexibility where you can play with it. If you have an object imported from somebody else, you would obviously do it in Pandora. If you play around with 3ds yourself, it's nice to do it there. The last thing for this part was to talk you through polygon counts. Is there anything, any questions so far to the UV map?
No, no questions about UV map, but they ask about Warper, but we will do it on Friday, I told them. So,
yeah, exactly. This webinar just got longer and longer, and already looking at the time, it's already 45 minutes. Yeah, so the Warper is part of Paris webinar on Friday. Polygon count. This is, I will just create a sphere. And a plane next to it. So, for the plane, the default segment count is 4. Of course, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if I set it up to 32, the result, the shaded one in here, if I put a material on it, it's not changing because it's just a planar surface. So having a lot of segments in here, it doesn't really give you any advantage. It's just eating up your performance. More or less, you can think of each vertex in here as a pixel in an image, for example. If you have 100 pixels, of course you don't really are nearly at the performance limit of Pandoras Box, but the more you add up and add up and add up, you kind of, there is a point where you get to the performance limit. For a long time, we had a vertex count of 32,000 or 64 later on, and at one point we took this performance limit away from our software, so you can import even larger objects, but you will notice for sure at one point that that the performance is getting down, that for example if you import it to a venue site, it's just getting very slow to turn around there, to move it, to play it back in real time. If you export it, for example, as a with the export tool, then of course you will get each frame the one as it should be, but playing it back as live on the timeline, you will see that it's just stuttering a little more. So it's a nice workflow to get used to having the polygon count in mind always. So for planar surfaces, don't do this, and try to make it as polygon friendly as possible. Of course, when talking about spheres, if I would take down here the segment count, nobody would now say this is a nice sphere anymore. So whenever you have rounded surfaces, find a good setting where you have enough segments so that it looks nice, but not too much. If you import objects from somewhere else, I want to show you 3 different ways how you can monitor your polygon count. The first is object properties. Here you have vertices and faces. I will just explain in a second the differences between faces and so on. So here you have the number. Another number is under tools. More Polygon Counter. So this again tells you how many polygons or triangles you have in here. Funnily, here they call it triangles and somewhere else they call it faces. And last option is to use this, I think it's called statistics. It's under key number 7. XView show statistics. Yeah, so if you press 7 or choose this option, you have here now the poly and the vertex count. which is very nice if you have many objects and you just want to find out, okay, where's the object that I could maybe optimize. In order to configure this, you can go to the plus sign, configure viewport. Under statistics, what I have done is I don't want to see the frames per second, and I want to see the total in the selection 1. Okay. If you want to optimize something for the count in here, you can, for example, try to take the optimize modifier. So here you see already it got rid of all of our segments in here, and now obviously we would need to make a new UV map on it. There's also a Pro Optimizer. I would suggest that you have a look in the 3ds manual for what exactly those options are in here and how you can play around with them. Vertex and Polygon. Let's have a look in here, and I want to show you the, was it Poly Select? Yeah. With this button here, you see that I'm selecting the entire object. With that button, here they call it again Polygon, I would call it actually face. You can select each face separately. Now here it's important to know that this is again separated into triangles. So indeed there are actually 2, but you can not select right now with this tool. And then the vertex is actually this one. So sometimes you hear about the vertex count, sometimes you hear about the poly count. It depends on your object whether it's twice the number or not. So for example in here, when we look at the when we look at the plane here, you see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 vertices and 1, 2 polygons, because each face is separated into triangles. Trying to think of, there was one thing I really wanted to, talking about importing objects from somewhere else. What I stumbled over a lot is when I wanted to check how big the thing actually is, what I have. And I will just show you one example. When you make a cube, and let's make it 1 unit big. So if we have a look at the object properties, it tells us that the thing is 1 unit. If we now scale it, I guess we would all agree that this is 2 units now. We also see that it was scaled on here. But if I look at the object properties, it still tells us 1. So in many 3D modeling softwares, it is like this, that you create an object and it has kind of like the initial scale, and this is remembered with this object. And whatever you do afterwards, the transformations are just saved internally, and so that you can go back anytime to the initial, to the default or initial state. And this even happens when you export it. So if you want to see how big is the thing in real, what you can do is you can go to the tools, reset Xform, reset selected, and now if you go to object properties, you now see that this is 2. So just a nice thing to know, that you can kind of burn all the transformations into the object. And lastly, many times when I import something from somewhere else, and if I want to do something with it, for example, applying a UV map, sometimes it doesn't allow me to choose the modifier. So what you can then do is you can convert it to an editable mesh. And with editable meshes, pretty much everything is possible in 3ds. Looking at the modifiers. So now you can also edit the polys and whatever you want to do. So I think I ran through all my things I wanted to show you. Just let me check the editor, polygons, units, the low poly, always have the polygons and count. Yep. So far to that part of the webinar. Any questions? Otherwise, I want to show you the other example.
There is a question about remap. If I would to remap them using for LED screens, it's better to convert FBX in meshes and then remap them, or using FBX in layers and meshes, or remap PNGs in outputs. I think there are a lot of options to do this. We talk about it a little bit about different options in our UV mapping webinar. I'm trying to find the link, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, like Pari said, there are a lot of options and a lot of flexibility. So I think, if you look at the other webinar from Pari, this is going to answer it. Let me load the other, wait a sec, was it there already? Here we are. Save. This is just an example for a planning that I had to do once. I had a cut drawing, and I wanted, and they had somebody standing on a on a round, how's the word, stage, on the stage, and this person was looking in different directions because the audience was sitting here, and then they had a small stage in the back where also something was happening. And for this particular project, I had to decide where I wanted to hang our tracking cameras. So just from the 2D view, I was not really able to decide where is a good position for a camera, especially because I will just show you from the top. Especially because, let me just, there was already a lot of gear that was already hanging there. Wait a sec. Oh, the view is perspective. If I set it to orthographic, So these are all the lights that were already in here, and loudspeakers, etc. So what I did is I kind of decided initially where I wanted to put my cameras. I also had a plan where I was able to put them. And then I wanted to see whether this loudspeaker, for example, it kind of looks like this is a lot in my way, right? So I simply made a box here with some height. I decided for. Let me just take this away to have this clear view here again. And then I created the camera. I set up here the field of view from the camera. Normally our tracking cameras, or this model, had a field of view of 56, and I just put it to 51 to have some headroom. So I was, so I'm able to see even if it's not put there on this position exactly, and of course the tilt and the pan angle is quite tricky to match it to my digital plan here. So this was just to give me some headroom. And then if we now look at, I can set the viewport to camera number, what's the name? Back up right front. Back up right front. So now I see actually here, these are the two boxes that I've just shown you. So from the 2D plan, I would have said this is a terrible position, but looking at it in a 3D world just gives me the option to see, okay, this loudspeaker actually is not in my way, and I can see this person down here. And for this, I kind of made a small trick. I just had a cylinder with a small stick figure up here, and I put numbers on it so that I can see, okay, if the person looks in kind of direction number 7, it can be seen from camera, so I just checked that I have enough cameras seeing this person from here. And also with this area, I just went through all the cameras in here with the viewports. Let me just show you once how you can It's weird. Configure layout. So here you can change the layout, for example. So here you can choose now that this should be camera number 1, and this should be camera number 2, and so on. Yeah, you get the point of what I wanted to do in here. So I just made a plane on here. I put the PDF. I think I exported as an image and then put the image as a material on it, and then I started drawing my why is this now not? And then I started to make my materials, my objects and the boxes and the cameras down here. The very, very last thing is just want to mention that you can, of course, also render out something. So when you click on the render frame window here, you can say render, and then you have here a rendered view. So you can click here, render production, and then you see all the views from the camera. Yeah, so far. Are there any questions to this?
No questions anymore.
Okay. Then I would say I ran you through all of this in 1 hour. I'm sorry, I tried to do it in 45 minutes, but yeah, I hope it was worth it. Again, keep in mind, you can see this on YouTube, and here are just some links to it. And in our manual, you can also see a description for the general things about the coordinate systems, the units, UV maps, and all this. Okay. If you have any other questions, Kari and me will be on here for... Oh, no, nothing?
No questions.
Okay. You can still write them if you want to, if something comes into your mind. And yeah. So enjoy the rest of your day. And see you maybe on Friday on the webinar about Blender. Okay, goodbye.